This is Canon Fodder, episode 67, live from the briny deep. Joining us is the dissident rights, I guess, premier naval warfare expert, Mr. Clossington. How are you, sir?
I'm doing just fine. I mean, I wouldn't refer to myself as an expert on naval history. I'd just say more of an appreciator of naval history and all
On,
that entails.
on the internet, you can be an expert in whatever you want. I'm an expert in literature because I declare it until somebody tells me I'm not.
Yeah,
So,
fair enough.
how are
Um,
you doing, sir?
like, I mean, I guess I could be a little bit better. I could have an encyclopedic knowledge of marine biology, but um, passing knowledge is good enough to understand this book.
So I read this book sort of on a whim. My wife got me a 3 volume or a 3 book collection of Jules Verne's, 3 main novels. This Journey to the Center of the Earth and Around the World in 80 Days. And I picked it up and I read it and I was like, wow, this is so good. I can't believe I hadn't read Jules Verne sooner. So I reached out to you because I knew that you were a sort of deep sea appreciator, and we were able to get this episode together pretty quickly. So I appreciate uh, your your flexibility in that.
Well, I believe you asked me what kind of book recommendations I had on my plate. You guys already covered Confederacy of Dunces, if I remember correctly,
Yes,
with Dan Baltic, right?
yes, yep.
And I also had just looking around my office, I was like, okay, which books could I speak extemporaneously on? Um, and in my small library, I have my copy of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that I bought when I was in high school. Like it actually kind of smells because I was a lifeguard at the time, and I accidentally spilled my anti-chlorine like stuff on it, so it's a little it's a little worse for
It's
wear.
it's it's weathered a storm or two, a squall
Yeah,
even.
yeah, it almost looks like a little bit like weathered. And I also recommended, was it like Master and Commander,
Yep.
and like the actual, well, the first book is a pretty good self-contained like little adventure, and then Moby Dick, which is a brick and almost biblical in its sort of scope.
Yes, and
And
we are planning to do Moby Dick with a friend of the show and somewhat co-host Christopher Sandbatch. So that I'm excited for that one when we get that off the
yeah,
ground.
um, so just to give a little bit of a background on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. People kind of refer to the sort of original titans of early, or I guess late Victorian fiction, like science fiction. Like after like Mary Shelley, you have the two greats, H.G. Wells and Jules Verne. Now, have you actually read any of H.G. Wells?
I've read a couple of things. I read The Time Machine, and I also read oh gee, what's the one never the Invaders from Mars? What's that one?
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds. Yes,
He's
thank you.
also known for The Invisible Man.
Yes, yes. I haven't read The Invisible Man, but it's on the list. I've got just like I have. I like the Everyman's Library collections of books, so I have Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, and it's sort of a collection of their best works in one volume.
So in their own times, H.G. Wells, he was a sort of famous, Fabian socialist, political commentator, a well regarded in his own time. But whenever I actually read him, I always end in a sort of bad mood. Like,
Mm,
his he has a very soft sci-fi, let's extrapolate the themes of let's extrapolate some fantastical technology to the nth degree, and comment on how this affects mankind, how this reflects on the soul of mankind or whatever. And it always puts a bad taste in my mouth. Like, you know his sort of apocalyptic visions in Time Machine, his what he thinks of human nature with the Invisible Man. It's like, we're perverts on the inside, and we'll become just these horrible like criminal types without the pressures of society looking back on us. Or War of the Worlds, the anti-Darwinian, let's see how these horrible imperialistic powers like it when the
When they
Martians
are
show
being
up.
oppressed upon. Yes.
But on the opposite end, you have Jules Verne, who, whenever I read him, I always end up in a good mood. In his own time, he wasn't particularly well regarded. He was sort of more of the pulpier sci-fi novelist. The the chapters of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea are serialized. So every other week, you get these 10 pages or so drip fed to you, and each kind of chapter is somewhat self-contained. And this book is very sort of episodic in the little adventures that we go on.
It's so interesting that Verne is considered the pulpier one and was less famous in his own lifetime, considering he puts in, I'd say he puts in more work to make the plot of the book not only make sense but work scientifically.
Well, he takes sort of like I think that it comes from the fact that he takes sort of the low hanging fruit and doesn't necessarily extrapolate it into a political or moral message.
Mm.
What do you take away from Around the World in 8 Days? Well, you end up with these very, isn't modern logistics and transportation great? And look at all these little fun adventures we have while gallivanting around the world. Isn't it kind of exhilarating? Or 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Isn't it great that modern technology allows us to have submarines? Here are all of the little adventures that could happen in a very exaggerated way. But yeah, you are right. He does have his books are very technical. He will never say jellyfish. He'll give you the exact Latin family and species that it belongs to, and Jellius luminescens epiphagus, whatever, fields of them above our heads, but he'll never say jellyfish. And he'll give the technical term for a subspecies of manatee in the Red Sea rather than just throwing it at you, which is a little bit much, and it's almost easier if you kind of imagine these creatures almost fantastical. It's best if you just don't know what they are or have a vague grasp of what they are. I looked at a few different other YouTube reviews of this, and a lot of people say that they enjoyed this book more when they were kids, because you're not trying to reason with what exactly these creatures are, so much as you're in kind of this sort of childlike wonder of what the hell am I looking at.
So to make a crude analogy, have you ever seen the Wes Anderson film The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou?
Yes, I have.
So one of my favorite films, right? And it has that sort of the most Wes Anderson-y part of the film is the made up sea creatures that he puts in it. There's the jaguar shark, there's the bioluminescent jellyfish that land on the shore of their island. There's the multicolored seahorse. All kinds of fantastical aquatic creatures that probably don't exist in the real world, but that doesn't matter because they serve to make the world a little bit richer.
Right. That's the sort of strength of Jules Verne. He has a very whimsical imagination, and he's very well versed in the sort of technical aspects of whatever he's writing about. Whether it's marine biology, the sort of cutting edge of geology at the time, and a basic understanding of mechanics and physics. Um, which it's if you're a marine biologist, you'd love this book, but I'm not sure how many people actually are. Jules Verne, he takes a sort of established science of the day, and he just pushes it just a little bit farther. Um, like in his own time, he went to an exhibit for the Plongeur, which is one of France's first submarines in 1867, I believe.
Mm.
And it's not too long. It's pretty small. It can only go like 30 feet beneath the surface, but that's still cutting edge for the day. So
Correct me if I'm wrong. The first submarine was used during the Civil War, correct?
so that is not correct.
Okay,
So the first submarine to have successfully sunk another ship was in the Civil War. That was the
got it.
CSS Hunley. Although, basically what you'd imagine so if you want to imagine the CSS Hunley, it's basically like, a 30-foot long canoe, a sort of encased canoe with a basically like a motorcycle engine strapped to a propeller, and in front of it is just like a spear with like some explosives attached to it. And the goal is just to go right at the enemy and touch the explosives to the enemy ship and blow it up.
So very very Greco-Roman sort of naval style.
Yes, it succeeded, but then it didn't come back. It was kind of lost, and it was found in Charleston Harbor, and if you're in Charleston, you can still visit it to this day. During the American Revolution, we had the turtle, which was, if you want to imagine it, it was think of it like, do you know those like big like wooden casks of beer?
Yes,
Imagine one of those, except a little bit larger, and there was like a propeller that was hand cranked
I see. So
and
so the kind of thing
straps
that
on.
would the kind of thing that would go over Niagara Falls.
Yeah, and what they did was they strapped a little bit of gunpowder to it, and the goal was, hey, you're underwater, crank your little wheel and get to the British ship and attach the gunpowder to it, and then get away. It didn't work, but it was an idea. And then during the Napoleonic Wars, Robert Fulton, who had the first commercial steamship company in the Hudson. He was contracted by Napoleon to create, Napoleon's first submarine, the Nautilus, which this ship is the Nautilus of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is named after. It's kind of like one of those, the same type of barrel, just a little bit elongated, and it has like a little fan on the top, just like as like a little sail. And same theory, explosives on a stick. Um, I mean it was also hand cranked as well, and you only had a couple hours of breathing time, but it was still a submarine. Um, so by Jules Verne's time, submarines could go 30 feet under the sea, and um, you're still dealing with explosives on a stick. But at the same time, I believe it was like 1866, the first self-propelled torpedo was invented. It was the Whitehead torpedo.
Mm.
Um, And also at the same time, you had, the advent of very long range shell guns. So in France, they, like, starting with like Napoleon III, they kind of, like, the French Navy kind of realized that they couldn't go toe to toe with the British, like, battleships, just because of their industrial inferiority. However, they realized, hey, a 35-ton submarine or torpedo boat could sink a 6,000-ton battleship. So let's invest in all these sort of absurd naval projects, experimental naval projects, with submarines, torpedoes, mines, um, and very sort of absurd looking tumble home battleships.
Reminds me of sort of what we're experimenting today with drone technology.
Yes. This French school was called the Jeune École, or the New School, but this was sort of in the milieu of the time that Jules Verne was writing. France is very experimental and speculative, and there's a sort of underlying feeling that submarines and torpedoes, these are going to be the future. And also we have this weird electricity thing, and we have better engines, and what kind of wonder could happen with this?
Now, quick question, and this is kind of an aside, but it's always been, I guess, it's been a curiosity, but not one that I ever felt like looking up. Uh, when Farragut is attacking Mobile Bay, and he says, "Damn the torpedoes, full steam ahead." What were the torpedoes that he's talking about? If the conventional torpedo that we're thinking of these days is hadn't been invented yet.
Are you talking about what is it? The Battle of Mobile Bay, right?
Yes, yes.
Um, I believe that he's more referring to like the mines, which are like, have you ever seen like Finding Nemo?
Yeah, I know what a sea mine
Like,
is. Yeah,
yeah, like those are that's what he was talking about. He's not
got it.
talking
Okay,
about like the self-propelled kind.
got it. Okay, cool. Just thought I'd ask.
Yeah. The Yeah. So that's that. Um, they 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea did name Captain Farragut of the USS Abraham Lincoln after David Farragut,
Mm.
the first uh, full admiral of the U.S. Navy. But I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
So to set the scene of the book, we have a French professor visiting the United States, Professor Arnex. Uh, I'm sure I'm butchering that, but I don't speak French.
It's assistant professor Aaron X.
Got it. And he's actually he's been hearing rumors of this giant sea monster. One of the things that I really liked about this book, right? Because I knew about the Nautilus, right? I knew about Captain Nemo, but I for at the beginning I thought, oh, we're gonna be hunting a giant sea monster on the Nautilus. That's great. Not putting together that spoiler alert. The monster that they've been hunting after this whole time is actually just the Nautilus submarine. So that was a really good sort of twist by Verne to do that.
Wait, so you went in completely blind
Pretty
to
much. I again, I knew who Captain Nemo was. I knew what the Nautilus was, but otherwise, yeah, I kind of didn't know the story of 20,000 Leagues as well.
Yeah, like growing up, I was introduced to the 1954 movie before reading the book. Like talking to a few other people, they have seen the movie but not the book. Um, the I could probably, like, after we're done, with our discussion, I could probably just give a brief synopsis on the differences between the book and the movie. But
No, go ahead, because I'm sure that'll be interesting to people as well.
no, I think we should probably just go through the actual plot of the book before getting to the movie,
Fair enough.
because the movie kind of does a lot of the same scenes, just kind of out of order, and it also gives a little bit more of a backstory to Captain Nemo than the book lets on.
Mm,
And Jules Verne has he he kind of undoes a lot of the good work that he did in the book in making Nemo mysterious with
hmm
the mysterious island. But that's I
Right.
can get into
Yeah.
that a little later.
Yeah. Famously, I had a tough time. It's clear that Captain Nemo is a student of Western civilization and an appreciator of it, and a lover even of Western civ. So to have him sort of later be revealed to be from India, uh, and hating the British Empire seemed not. It seemed sort of ham fisted,
Well, I mean,
which is funny
well,
because Verne was trying to not court controversy with that decision, because he originally wanted Nemo to be Polish, I think.
um, so in terms of author's intent, he, like I said earlier, he's a lot less political. Jules Verne as a author is a lot less overtly political than H.G. Wells, but he is sort of a center left, sort of liberal Republican in France.
Mm,
And yes, they do not particularly like the British Empire. Although I can talk a little bit later on, what exactly Nemo's what exactly Nemo's political commentary is. Um, but I guess, yeah, originally he did kind of, Verne kind of meant for him to be sort of this, eccentric, like, Polish nobleman. But yeah, in Mysterious Island, they do make him out to be, Prince Dakar, Indian Raj, who was dispossessed by the British Empire, you know, and then, have you ever heard of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
I have, yes. That's part of where. So I saw the film, which is not very good, but I saw it when I was a kid, and I always thought it was cool. And that was my introduction to Captain Nemo.
Yeah, I actually have the original the original graphic novel.
Right.
It's not very good,
No, Alan
but
Moore is
it's not its plot is absurd. Its character motivations don't make any sense. It kind of goes off the rails at the end, but
yeah.
um, but Alan Moore does make Captain Nemo, like, very, very. He makes him a Sikh, and he turns the Nautilus into, like, it looks like a squid, and like, Captain Nemo drives around it like he's like Batman in the Batmobile. So
I mean, they even have in the film, at least, they even have a Batmobile from the Nautilus. He's like, "Oh, this is my automobile." Uh, yeah, it's ridiculous, but one of those things that you watch as a kid, so you uh, have fond memories of, even if they're not very good.
yeah, so where so just to sort of give a an introduction to, like, how the book starts. Like you said, all across the world, there are ships that keep on either disappearing, or something rams them. There are two different schools of thought as to who or what is doing it. One is, it's some sort of previously unknown sea monster, or two, it's some sort of government psyop, some sort of submarine contraption that some hated European power is trying to trying to mess with someone. And our professor Aronnax, he's in I think it was like Iowa, doing geology, whatever. And he goes into sort of the rationale of the sea monster argument. He's like, all right, so sea pressure, right? 1 atmosphere. You go down, 30 feet, it's 1 atmosphere. The amount of water pressure doubles every 30 or so feet. Imagine how strong an animal at the bottom of the ocean is. How big would it have to be to survive under those pressures? And we don't know that much about the ocean. We haven't found the bottom of the ocean in several points due to experimental soundings. So could there be like a 60-foot long narwhal somewhere that we haven't seen that we've disturbed through explosives? Maybe. And at in 1860s France, that's still a possibility. So he agrees to this expedition with the USS Abraham Lincoln to hunt down the beast, because all of these insurance companies are, claiming that whenever their ship doesn't arrive on time or, goes missing, it's the monster. It can be written off as an act of God, and these insurance companies can't take it. So the U.S. dispatches a warship.
Which it's, as far as realism goes, that's so funny, because that's exactly that's exactly how it would occur. Recently, we've had not so much an act of God, but act of terror with the Houthis, right? And how much money did the U.S. military spend to kind of barely solve that problem, if you could even call it solved? So yeah, very, very interesting the way that Verne understands especially American politics, but I guess real politics in regards to commercial shipping.
Yeah, and not to sort of say that Verne was off, but the U.S. dispatches what's called an ironclad frigate, which it's slower. It's almost exclusively steam powered, and it's probably not what the U.S. would actually have sent. They probably would have sent a wooden sloop of war, like to as an expeditionary vessel. But that's just me.
I'm my take on that is that they're sending their premier ship, to show at least save face, because it takes them like what, 2 months, if that, to find any evidence that this thing exists.
So they head out in June and they wander around until October.
Oh, so like 4 months, really.
Yeah, that's what what it actually looks like. So yeah, that's there's a big crowd that sees them off. They the crew the U.S. also hires the premier like celebrity like what's it called? It's he's a whaler.
Right.
He's a harpoonist, Ned Land, who is Quebecois. So he speaks French. Jules Verne is French. Aronnax and his manservant Conseil are French, and Captain Nemo is going to be able to speak French too. So the language issue is no issue.
I will say this, not a lot of Conseils running around these days. Everybody needs a sort of right-hand man, can do anything butler, manservant type, who is loyal to a fault.
Yeah, like you know how I said all of these three guys are French. In the movie, Ned Land, Aronnax, and Conseil. Conseil and Aronnax are French, but all three of those guys are a certain other not Christian faith,
Mm.
so to speak.
Oh, interesting. I
Yeah.
didn't. I hadn't seen the film, so uh,
Yeah. But that's neither here nor there. Um,
what an interesting sort of odd detail to
y-
include there.
yeah. So the USS Abraham Lincoln and our crew venture from New York around around the passage of Cape Horn, and then go around the Pacific. Don't see anything. Ned Land, you know he's a sort of salt of the earth guy. His name is literally Land, um, and he's a very terra firma guy. He doesn't believe um, that a sea monster could exist, but the professor, he goes through the arguments that I just presented. The ocean is very deep and very big creatures could live down there, just based on pure physics. Um, and then eventually they come across the monster, and uh, and guess what? It rams into the ship, and the professor falls off. His loyal manservant jumps in after him, and I forget how. I think Ned Land was on like one of the little rowboats or
Yes,
one.
he was about to spear the monster, and his spear uh, obviously deflects because he's hitting the steel outer casing of the Nautilus. There's even an interesting part where before they're brought aboard, Land thinks that the giant narwhal that they're hunting is just has armor. It has been had armor grafted to it, which is fun.
Yeah, he goes to the argument. It's like, all right, how could this sized hole fit? Like, how could a narwhal cause this large of a hole to have been pierced into an ironclad? And it must have been pretty big and pretty armored to actually have done something like this. But this crew of three is stranded in the middle of the ocean, and they find the beast. And what is it? It's the submarine Nautilus, which in the movie it's a very sort of ornate, sort of spiky kind of submarine. Um, that almost kind of looks like what the original Nautilus that Napoleon ordered kind of looked like. Um, but in the book, it's cigar shaped.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more basic. If you could probably have mistook it for like a narwhal. It's cigar shaped. It's double holed. It's riveted. I think it's like 200 and was it 230 feet long
Something
by
like
like
that. Yeah.
26 feet wide, something like that. Um,
He also Verne also goes through painstaking like a painstaking sort of thought experiment of well, how would I actually build this thing, where he brings in all his engineers and raw materials to this desert island, and impresses the crew afterwards to this thing, like, so no nation on earth knows what he's doing.
Yeah, so they're kind of kept captive by this crew that pretends not to understand them, and they're brought seafood, and they are kind of just hanging out for a little while until eventually the leader of the ship, Captain Nemo, comes, and they say, can you let us out, please? And he says no, because then the whole world will know exactly who or what I am. Um, so either be on my ship for the rest of your lives, or I'll just let you drown, essentially. Um, so yeah, there's like a whole like small chapter of you know Captain Nemo explaining exactly how the ship works, like what the layout of each room is on the ship. Um, the Nautilus is powered by electricity. Verne explains it like the ship basically filters out all of like the salts in the water, all of the sodium and magnesium, and somehow that charges the engine and both lights the ship and powers the engine that propels the ship through the water. And it's Nemo also shows his guests around. He has this book of like 12,000 books. He has the music of all of the great composers, Wagner and Rossini. He has these pieces of art from the great masters somehow, and he's very well spoken. He can speak all these languages, and yet he calls himself like not a civilized man.
Right, and I mean, his name is Captain Nemo, right? From the Odyssey, when Polyphemus asks Odysseus who he is and who he's captured, Odysseus replies, "Nobody." Right, Nemo. So he is no one. Which giving him a proper backstory, giving Captain Nemo a proper backstory and an actual ethnicity, it really defeats the purpose of his character in my eyes. So
Yeah, he's supposed to be somewhat of a he's supposed to be something of a blank slate, so you could
yeah,
pin a
imprint
few
whatever you want.
themes
Yeah,
onto him.
right.
Like in the movie, right out the gate, Nemo takes the gang to this island where slaves are mining sulfur to be made into explosives, and he goes to Aronnax, and he's like, I used to be one of like me and the crew used to be slaves on this island, and we hate the war machine, we hate slavery. you know it it kind of squanders exactly what Nemo gets out in his actual actions throughout the book. But in the movie, you don't have the luxury of sitting through all of the misadventures.
Yeah, Nemo's really supposed to represent unbridled freedom. He's supposed to be the man, sort of the man without a country, but based, or at least the idealized form of the man without a country. Uh, and
So
to ascribe him these sort of lesser motives, these political motives or racial grievances, kind of diminishes that.
so I'll correct you a little bit where he
Sure.
does actually have very explicit political and to an extent racial and ecological concerns throughout the book. Like just as 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is kind of a strange title. 20,000. It's more like what is a league? It's a distance. It's like 3.5 miles. So the technical term, a better title or more accurate title, like more helpful title would be 70,000 miles traveled while underwater. So this entire book is sort of series of little adventures that we go around. Like we're going around the world, we're doing these little adventures in the unknown, and we're with Captain Nemo, and he does all sorts of things, and we see all sorts of creatures. Um, so, but throughout these misadventures, Nemo does actually do some very political things. He gives a bunch of pearls to this destitute Ceylonese like Indian guy. He gives gold bars to these Greek rebels in Crete. Um, what else does he do? He has all he sort of berates Ned for the absolute decimation of whales by the whaling industry,
Mm.
and how many whales are just going to die out, like how all the whales are going to be dead if whaling is to continue. So we've got to we've got to kill off some of the predators, and we've got to stop whaling. But he does talk about, I wish I could have like an underwater colony of free men who aren't bound by the limitations of, ecology, like brutal imperial realpolitik and the necessity to use whale oil to fuel civilization. So he does have sort of these little political commentary things throughout the book.
Yeah, I guess my read of him was a little self-serving in that way.
Like he does talk about, the oppressed races, and I am one of them. But we don't exactly get his backstory until the very, very end. Like the plot doesn't really push forward until the last like 20 pages. We don't get
and that's just part of the serialized format that Verne's writing in at the time. It's just you get your little story, this sort of self-contained thing that eventually gets collected into a book at the end.
Yeah, that's how this book is actually structured. Like we could go through the sort of journey that the guys actually go into.
Yeah, you want to pull up your map?
Yeah,
This is
sure.
a first for the show, is a visual component.
Yeah, so it's actually pretty tricky to actually see, or to actually, where is Captain Nemo on today's adventure? He's going all over the place across the globe. But I think it would be a little bit helpful in actually describing the story exactly, showing where on the map are we. So, like I said, start out in New York City, go around South America, the like Aronnax and the U.S. Navy are going all around the Pacific trying to find the monster, and then off the coast of Japan, the monster is actually spotted. Our guys end up on the Nautilus, and we start our adventure with Captain Nemo, where our gang, Professor Aronnax is, an assistant professor at the Museum of Paris. He's very interested in, the natural sciences. He loves the ability to, to see what's underneath the ocean. With, in the summary, they have this window that opens up around the saloon, like the saloon around the middle of the ship, where he can see all the sea creatures, and the gang can get out and put on these scuba gear stuff, which is, I find it kind of funny the way that they describe the scuba gear, because light bulbs hadn't been invented yet, so they have like the Romankampf lamp or whatever it is, which is like sort of precursor to light bulbs, but it's like this sort of coil that you have to generate electricity through to make work. But we go from the coast of Japan, and then to the island of Crespo, where Professor Aronnax is very happy to get off the ship with the guys and go underwater hunting in their little scuba suits. Ned Land, he is a creature of the land. He wants to hunt on the land, but has to satisfy himself with like hunting things underwater. He doesn't like, you don't have harpoon guns like in the movie, but they do have these. How are like the electrical guns like constructed? They're like little bullets with electricity.
Yeah,
like,
it's almost like a rail gun. Yeah, like a tiny rail guns.
Yeah, it's like a little rail gun, but the little bullet is charged with electricity. So whenever it hits something, it stuns them or kills it or whatever. So on the island of Crespo, they, Nemo shoots this like giant sea spider that menacingly looks at Professor Aronnax. They shoot like a 6 foot long, like what is it, like a sea otter or something that was going to attack them, and then they keep going. What is it? Squid Shoal. Oh, they come across a was like the lost was it the lost treasure of some like French James Cook kind of figure,
Mm.
something like that. Oh yeah, that's La Perouse's shipwrecks down here. Um, Captain Nemo, he figures himself to be the sort of was it like the king of his own nation, and his nation is everything underneath the water where these imperial powers can't touch him. Um, so he's claimed all of the shipwrecks and all the property of the shipwrecks for his own, and he's cataloged just about all of them, including all of these ships that went down with all of this gold. And he figures, with all of the gold and all of these shipwrecks, he could pay off the national debt of France twice over, something like that. And then we come across Papua New Guinea, where they think it's an uninhabited island, but our trio is allowed to get off and hunt for themselves. It's a very picturesque kind of island. The guys, they kill some kangaroos and some parrots, and they get some breadfruit, and they have a good time hunting. And Ned is kind of like, hey, we should really kind of like find a way to escape this, because I don't want to be in a submarine for my whole life.
Mm.
But then guess what? The island isn't uninhabited, and there are actually a bunch of cannibals here. And just like in the movie, the cannibals like hundreds of them try and chase the crew back onto the submarine. The guys are, the guys say, "Hey, Nemo, we're getting raided," but Nemo's very nonchalant because I think it's like the railing around the hatch of the Nautilus is electrified.
Mm.
So whenever the natives try and touch the railing or try and get onto the hatch, they all get electrocuted.
What's that South Pacific island that does the cargo cults? Uh,
I forget what it was.
but yeah, could you imagine the cargo cult around the Nautilus?
Yeah, I could imagine something like that. Like in the movie, the like Conseil and Ned Land conspire to run off and live on the island, but accidentally come across the cannibals, and Nemo berates them for trying to escape. So there's a little thing there. Um, I'm not sure if there's anything too much to say about that little adventure. Um, big difference between the movie and the book. The book is very concerned about the amount of air the Nautilus has,
Mm.
because they can only go like they don't have air filters or like compressed canisters full of air that they could supply the Nautilus with. They have a backup engine that could provide like 48 hours of extra air, but they have to actually go up for air every couple days, or the air gets stale and they choke. Uh, so
Which again, it just kind of shows the thought that Verne is putting into this, because he could have easily just made up some magical device that makes like, oh, it separates the air out of the water so that there's a constant supply of water all the time. But he doesn't. He's practical. He's trying to work within the realms of science at the time and engineering. Yeah.
yeah, and later on, it does actually become a sort of environmental hazard, running out of air. And the ship is also not completely indestructible, where they can only go so deep in the water before the structural integrity just goes out.
Hmm.
Um, Verne was very fastidious in his descriptions of the Nautilus, so we know that's like it's double hold, which means there's you know there's the actual like structure itself, and then there's another layer on top of it separated by thick bulkheads.
Hmm.
So it's sort of like a reinforced extra strong hull. So we know that it's strong, but it's not that strong, and it
Right.
can be it can't go too
It's
deep.
not like it's made of un unbreakable inium or something. Like it's like he's
Yeah, it's not a made up metal. It's just what we have, just a little bit better, and within the realm of reality. Um, if they go too close to a volcano and it gets too hot, yes, the people inside will get uncomfortable because it's still a real, it's a real thing. Um, so they keep going for a little bit longer. The next big event, in my opinion, is um, Captain Nemo tells all the guys to get down below into their little cabins for some unspecified reason. We won't know until, I guess, the end of the book exactly what's going on, but Nemo apparently snuck some sort of sedatives in their um, in their breakfast, and they're out. And then the next day, Nemo goes to Professor Aronnax and says, "Are you a doctor? One of our men has this horrific like skull fracture." Um, Nemo won't exactly say how this was caused, but we'll find out later. And this man just dies, and we have this nice coral graveyard funeral for the dead sailor who passes away due to his head trauma. Um, so, what has Nemo been up to while our gang you know, were unconscious? We'll find out later. Um, so it's kind of spoiled early on in the movie, but in the book, it doesn't really come across like you don't really find out what happened until the very end. In the movie, the scene after we are introduced to the gang and the Nautilus. Next scene, we see Nemo um, with his vendetta against these arms suppliers. And then what does Nemo do? He uses the Nautilus to ram and sink this munitions ship out of revenge. In the book, we don't actually find out that Nemo is a little bit psychotic and has been indiscriminately sinking ships as revenge against the world for the death of his wife and children, and exactly you know what his specific motivation is. Um, so presumably Nemo knocked him out so that his crew could sink some ship for some reason, and so that you know the guys wouldn't freak out on him. And the sailor or the crew member presumably struck his head or was concussed while the Nautilus struck this ship. So it's it's not very friendly.
no,
So
definitely not. And we again, it's one of the things that makes Nemo so interesting is he is a product of Western civilization while also despising it. And actually, I'm thinking about this sort of out loud. So feel free to tell me it's dumb, but maybe making him Indian actually sort of does add to that tension. We see. I covered the Camp of the Saints with Dimes a few episodes back, and one of the parts of the book, there's these Indian intellectuals who have come over to the West, and they themselves are even more ardent that the ships have to be stopped before they land in France, because how much that they know what is to become of France if they land. So Nemo has this tension of being a product of the West while not actually being of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. His crew, the crew of the Nautilus, they speak their own sort of pidgin, but
Mhm.
you kind of figure like, uh, like Professor Aronnax does a quick like physiognomy check on all of the crew. He's like, that guy looks Greek, that guy looks German, that guy, I thought I heard him speaking French. That guy looks very Anglo. It's a very sort of pan-European kind of like crew. It's not like it kind of sticks out when surprise, Captain Nemo is actually Prince Dakar. It doesn't quite.
No, it
I don't know.
certainly doesn't gel as well as him being just even just not exploring it. Like him having a dead wife and children is kind of enough.
Yeah, him having a dead wife and kid and two dead kids, and hating, you know, Western imperialism, and having this sort of sensitivity to nature in the marine world, and hating whalers, and hating, you know, even hating sort of the Ottoman Empire by his funding of Greek rebels.
Right, right.
Um, he he constantly rails against like despotism, and you don't really need to like know exactly what his family history is, but obviously it was traumatic. He's a very well-read guy. He knows all of the greats of. He's an amateur art collector,
Hmm.
or actually he's a very prolific art collector. He knows all of the great. He knows all of the great musicians.
And it's funny too, because like when he first gets on the ship, Nemo says, "Oh, Professor Aronnax, I actually have a few of your books. You'll find that everything on you wouldn't need to leave the Nautilus. We have pretty much every volume. They're like an underwater library of Alexandria."
Yeah, 12,000 books in like six languages, and all the languages are kind of out of order. So presumably he speaks these languages fluently. They're all technical books, and not a single book on political economy. Interestingly enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Who needs political economy when I can just divorce myself from politics, or at least the the minute politics, because he's again, yeah, as you say, he's going to war with sort of Western civilization. In that way, he's almost like the anti-Ahab.
He, he, well, there's a lot to Ahab, and there's a lot to Nemo. Nemo, he's more of this sort of, he's almost even more mythic than someone like Ahab,
Mm,
because of how little like actual details we know about his personal life or
right.
his personal motivations. All we know is he has these passions. He loves like marine bio. He loves marine ecology, and some Europeans killed his wife, and he has a soft spot for oppressed oppressed animals and oppressed people. But he isn't afraid to say these cannibals, these uncivilized cannibals, are basically animals, um, that he doesn't really pay any attention to. They just get shocked and they go away.
Yeah, I guess I mean he's the anti-Ahab in that while Ahab's singular obsession is Moby Dick the white whale, you have Nemo, whose singular obsession is, I guess, in his own way, it's his own white whale is broadly despotism, but also he wants to save the whales. So again, crude analogy, but it kind of works.
Like, I, it's not really outright said, he has any sort of particular end goal beyond exploring the oceans to his heart's content because he loves the oceans. And then, every once in a while, if he sees a ship, just blow it up. But yeah, we're not really completely clear. It's more of the journey than the actual like characterization of Nemo that really matters. Like he while diving for pearls off of Ceylon, Sri Lanka, he sees the largest pearl anyone's ever seen. It's the size of like what's it like the size of a coconut.
Mm-hmm.
He just says, leave it. I don't really need this. But they keep on chugging along. They eventually come into the Red Sea. There's
They avoid the Houthis.
they avoid the Houthis. There's a long sort of monologue about was it like why is the Red Sea called the Red Sea? Obviously, it's blue. There's a little bit of background on that. It's apparently because there's a type of red seaweed or red algae that every once in a while blooms, something like that. And then Ned Land is allowed to hunt dugongs, which are like a type of manatee, essentially. And he enrages this herd of manatees that almost like capsizes the boat and kills him, but he survives.
So,
Mhm.
what's interesting about this part through the Red Sea is the secret tunnel that the Nautilus goes through, because this is before the Suez Canal is built, correct?
So this book takes place in 1866. The book is published, serialized in 1870. I believe the Suez Canal was under construction in 1868 or no 1869 or something like that. So it's like brand new or it's under construction and it doesn't quite exist. And so Professor Aronnax is like, all right, where are we going to next? Nemo says the Mediterranean, and they're in the Red Sea right now, and the Suez Canal doesn't exist. So he's like, all right, Nemo, how are you going to get us to the Mediterranean in 2 days? How are we going to round all of Africa in 2 days? Nemo says, well,
We're
funny.
going to avoid Africa like the plague.
Yeah, avoid Africa like the plague. We don't want to visit this. Where I actually found this one underground tunnel connecting the Red Sea to the Mediterranean because I was fishing in the Red Sea and I tagged some of the fish, and some of those tagged fish ended up around Syria. So they must have gone there somehow. And he finds this sort of underground tunnel underneath the Sinai, and they shoot right through it. And no, it's I think I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but we have tunnels underneath the ground that lead to the center of the earth, into the hollow earth in Jules Verne. So it's not.
Yeah, it's at least plausible enough that you kind of can hand wave it away. And then a few years later they build the Suez Canal, so it's kind of moot at that point. I
Yeah,
thought it was an elegant solution to a problem I didn't even think of.
yeah, yeah. It's they just shoot right through it, and I think they said like it was only like 20 minutes underneath it. They just got shot right through it because of how was it? It's because the Red Sea is higher than the Mediterranean, so the pressure is going downward, and it just kind of got like shot out through it. But it is what it is. And then they make their way out to Crete, into the Grecian islands, and Nemo drops off was it like 40 pound, like 40 ingots of gold worth like 200,000 pounds or something like that, to some rebels. and then they dive deep and go around some volcanoes for some reason. Um, Ned Land constantly tries to say like, "Hey, let's try and escape. The Greek islands aren't too far of a swim. We can do it." But you know, Aronnax talks him down, and I believe that their escape plan was interrupted when Nemo goes onto this long monologue with with Aronnax. So no escape. Keep chugging along. Go across the Strait of Gibraltar,
We still
where
got the whole Atlantic Ocean, man. Like, go on.
yeah, we're just chugging along. Um, this is they cover essentially 70,000 miles in 7 months, which is an ungodly
Yeah, they're booking it.
fast. Yeah, one chapter we're off the coast of Spain, next chapter we're in the South Pole. This goes very, very quick. And they come across the sunken galleons at Vigo Bay. Early 1700s, this treasure fleet was sunk, or it was scuttled before the English could seize them during the War of the Quadruple Alliance or something like that. And Nemo says, "Hey, all of this gold and all of these shipwrecks are mine and mine alone. And yeah, I'll do whatever I want with it." Um, I forgot to mention, like you said earlier, the Nautilus is revealed to have been a sort of international project where each of the little pieces of the ship were assembled piecemeal.
Mm-hmm.
It's got Krupp steel. It's got engines from Laird in England. It's had some parts here from France, parts from Sweden, parts from the U.S., all assembled on my little private island. And then I blew up the workshops so that no one could replicate them. And each of the part orders were made in different anonymous
Right.
companies.
He's really trying to at least plausibly, like, oh, this guy's so rich he can kind of do that. He was already independently wealthy before he started to build his ship. I keep thinking like, oh, I wonder how much of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea inspired Batman. You've got the manservant who's super loyal. You've got like an ungodly amount of money that he can just throw money at the problem. Basically, uh, yeah.
I believe Batman is more inspired by, I think it was called the Hood or something like that.
Yeah.
From like
There's the
the
shadow.
Shadow. That's
Yeah.
what it was from. I remember hearing a Jonathan Bowden speech where
Yes. Yes, I remember that one.
in his very John Bowden-esque way says proto Batman is a liberal. He he's a wealthy guy who captures these poor criminals, and then he messes with their brains or he does brain surgery on them so they can't be criminals no more, instead of just killing them because he's progressive. So something like that,
Right. Right.
is Bowden-esque way. But yeah, he is a sort of
Well, then I wonder how much this might have inspired the shadow. I mean, you could probably go back and uh, say this inspired that and that and that.
yeah, Nemo's sort of this anti-hero, wealthy eccentric anti-hero with his Victorian era autistic fixations. You know, yeah.
I was thinking the other day when I was reading this, all you see all these billionaires that are building their super yachts. Where is the billionaire that's building his super submarine?
Yeah, haven't seen it. I think the closest we get are these space billionaire space programs.
Yeah, yeah. I don't. I think Elon Musk, you need to build yourself a super submarine that you can shit post from the seven seas.
Right. So they keep chugging along. They casually visit Atlantis, which, right where Plato said it was, just
Hmm.
past the Strait of, or was it like past the Pillars of Hercules, past the Strait of Gibraltar, around the Azores. Um, you know, Nemo, he taps Professor Aronnax on the shoulder. He's like, "Hey, check this out." And they put on their little scuba suits, and Nemo takes him to this sort of active volcano and underwater ruins that, Nemo writes on a rock, Atlantis. And they kind of nerd out over that for a little bit. Um, and then they visit this this dormant volcano. It already erupted, so it's completely hollow on the inside. But Nemo goes there for his coal deposits because some part of the machine of the engine needs coal fired to actually extract these salts in the ocean to power the electric engine, whatever it is. But they explore this dormant volcano. One difference between the book and the movie is that the movie, the Nautilus is not powered by an electric engine. It's actually nuclear powered. Um, and Nemo is very concerned about Imperial powers getting their hands on his nuclear submarine. And in the movie, um, Nemo did not blow up his workshop, but he actually has this sort of layer called Volcania on this island
Hmm.
where he has like essentially like a nuclear power plant.
He's got his Bond villain island.
Yeah, it is actually a Bond villain island, um, like located approximately where we end up going.
Right.
Um, but yeah, we casually visit Atlantis. We go through the Sargasso Sea where we see this sea of whatchamacallit, sea of like seaweed. And then we keep chugging along, keep on going south all the way to where we're chugging all the way down to the South Pole. And on the way, we don't have any chances to escape. Um, Nemo goes on to his little tirade about how we need to save the whales before they're all dead. And there are, what's the technical term they used for sperm whales? It's like chata something.
I don't remember. You.
He says that there are, hey Ned Land, I see you keep on complaining that you can't kill any whales out of habit. We don't need any whale meat. But there are, these good whales that are, just doing their own business, and there are sperm whales that are toothed and kill other whales. And so, what Nemo does is he kind of like rams all of these like sperm whales, calling all of the potential predators for these other whales, and Ned Land kind of calls him a hypocrite. But he just sees himself as a sort of steward of the ocean.
Right, which is we have our modern uh equivalents of that these days,
I mean, like
kind
as
of
a
stepping in where maybe without knowing what the ramifications may be, like
well,
third, fourth order ramifications.
like you know, like as like a Pennsylvanian, we have to cull the deer,
Oh,
or
I know very
they,
well.
they
Yeah.
they end up getting hit by cars. But we also have different wildlife services that stock different Great Lakes, and you have to have a certain ratio of predators to prey fish. And if you have too many predators, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a complete ecological collapse because all the prey are gone, and then all of the smaller fish and all of the algae get out of control. So he is doing his sort of stewardly and kind of hypocritical, I don't know, his little, um, slaughter of sperm whales. But yeah, they keep on chugging along.
They go to Neuschwabenland.
Yeah, so they end up going like underneath Antarctica and trying to find the South Pole. They kind of get out. They try and get out of Antarctica. Isn't like the South Pole isn't actually like discovered or visited by humans until I think it's like 1914 or something like that.
Yeah, Ernest Shackelford and
Well,
his
Shackleton didn't make it.
or Oh yeah, Shackleton's expedition doesn't make it. That's right. And then who does make it?
I forget who does actually make. Was it like? It's not Perry, was it?
I don't know.
I forget who it was who actually made it, but the guys like Nemo says, there's an ocean underneath the North Pole. Obviously, there's an ocean like just past the land of Antarctica somewhere on the South Pole. There just has to be.
Yeah,
And
no, that's
we
where
don't know.
that's where Agartha is.
We don't know where where 1870 France. There could be aliens like H.P. Lovecraft thought, but they keep on chugging and they find the South Pole. Captain Nemo sticks his little flag. It's a black flag with the letter N in the middle. He claims it for his own kingdom. And while trying to get back, they get stuck underneath the ice. And they almost, suffocate because of how dire things get. And they have to ration air while the crew kind of tries to put on their I'm sorry. There's yeah, so the crew has to get out and put on their scuba gear and actually pick out their way out of the ice, conserving air, but they just barely make it. It's almost the tensest the story actually gets. Although we'll come to the more tense scene later. But they eventually get free and keep chugging along all the way to the other end. Do you have anything to say about the being stuck underneath Antarctica moment?
No. How was it depicted in the film, if at all?
It wasn't.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, they kind of skip over that part. So they keep chugging along. They eventually come across some more manatees, and Kansei gets shocked by an electric eel. And then there's the sort of most famous scene from the movie and pretty exciting scene from the book where the gang in the Nautilus is in the Caribbean, and there's this mob of giant squid that just gloms onto the Nautilus propeller, and they can't move. So they decide to fight man to beast, get the hatchets, and Ned gets his harpoon, and the crew tries to dislodge the giant squids. And in the process, one of the sailors is picked up by the giant squid and is never seen again. Now this actually really does damage Captain Nemo, because he almost dies in Antarctica, trying to claim Antarctica selfishly and narcissistically for his own. And then like one of his crew gets killed by a giant squid. He really takes this to heart and starts kind of crying. And he goes into this sort of depressing sort of he goes into this depression where he's going to be a little bit more depressed throughout the rest of his book.
Right, right. And this is also sort of the point where uh I believe this is where Aronnax is sort of uh he's souring on Captain Nemo, and he doesn't fully turn and want to escape yet, but he's at least kind of listening to land a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, now like they don't really show this in the movie, but Nemo will kind of just disappear for a week, and now he's like disappearing for like 2 weeks at a time. Um, if this came out today, you'd think something along the lines of, does Nemo have like terminal cancer or
Right.
something like that, where he just kind of disappears? You know, I don't think that was what the intention was, but you kind of get that feeling where it
Right,
gets
that
kind of
there's
more weak and melancholic.
what's also, so it's so interesting too that we don't really get the crew's perspective. They're just like kind of loyal to a fault to Nemo and his mission. Uh, there's no there.
Yeah, like they have their own sort of pigeon, and they have their own little society. When one of them dies in when one of them dies, they are given like a proper little funeral where they have like a casket in like this coral forest. In the movie, as soon as the crew, as soon as our trio go on to get onto the Nautilus, the ship is empty. But why? It's empty because the crew of the Nautilus is in the coral forest, burying one of their dead, who presumably died due to the concussion caused when they rammed the USS Abraham Lincoln. So that scene is like a little bit out of order. But in this funeral, they bury this dead sailor with like a cross in front of it, and Nemo says, "This is how." Like he was talking in when they come across this wreck. This is the way I want to die, entombed in my ship underneath the sea, where my
Mhm.
corpse will never be disturbed. Yeah, so we do not get any sort of we don't get any sort of hints as to what exactly the crew are or what they think. We just know that they're blindly loyal to Nemo, and they're multinational in origin, just purely on physiognomy. But we do get a sort of camaraderie between our main trio and the crew, because our trio does do their damnedest to help everyone survive in the South Pole, and we do see them help out in hunting and in all of the little misadventures. But throughout the book, we are trying to get off and escape somehow. Although Aronnax is kind of suckered in based off of his own sort of morbid curiosity. Although Nemo says, if like whenever I die, I have like a book of all of my knowledge of the seas in my own biography, my own autobiography. I'll throw it over I'll put it in this like little box.
His
Uh,
own little sort of note in a bottle.
yeah, he'll just throw it out. And whoever will find it will find it. Um, but yeah, that's his sort of morbid. That's his morbid. Um, his morbid death wish. And soon enough, we come across this other ship just off the coast of like the UK or France. And what does Nemo do? He decides to ram it, where we have the full horror of what Nemo actually is. And our trio, Aronnax says, I can't be an accomplice of this or a witness to this. I need to get out because we see the ship go down. We see all of these sailors, dead in the water, and we can't stand this anymore. Nemo's obviously off his rocker. And not too long after that, we're sailing up north around the Falkland Islands and around the Maelstrom, which are these giant whirlpools. Nemo, out of melancholy, decides to just steer right into these whirlpools while our trio,
Manages to escape, yeah.
managed to escape on the little life raft or onto like the little boat attached to the Nautilus. In the movie, Nemo tries to take Aronnax to his nuclear power plant on Vulcania, but Ned Land and Conseil put a bunch of letters in a bottle with the coordinates of Vulcania, and the Imperialists find the island, and Nemo decides to blow it all up.
Right.
And
very very sort of Bond villain, actually.
Yeah, he's this misanthropic Bond villain, who is anti-imperialist or whatever his motives are. We get a much more melancholic Captain Nemo in the book, where he does kind of commit suicide, and we don't actually know what his exact motives are. Just that he's gone.
So that's basically the book, and unfortunately, I have to be going in a moment. But I wanted to give you the floor and explain maybe why you love this book so much, and also where people can find and support your work.
So why do I love this book? It is a little bit dense, and a lot of people do complain about the very technical jargon associated with the book. Although I think that after reading it in chunks, you end up in a very good mood afterwards with a sort of you kind of get into this sort of whimsy and sense of wonder that that these guys must have felt in the 1870s when these new advancements were coming out. And I think bear with the technical language. It's a very solid sort of serialized adventure novel, and I have a certain fondness for it. In terms of where you can actually find me, I'm on Twitter, Telegram, not so much YouTube anymore, although I might revive that rather soon. You can find me writing and sometimes attending live streams for the Old Glory Club. I will show the Old Glory Club conference that's coming up in a few months.
I believe that's already sold out. I think it's sold out in a day, right?
We sold out in the first 4 hours.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Our guys are actually doing things.
Yeah, and I'm also starting an Old Glory Club chapter in Pittsburgh, so be on the lookout for announcements whenever my chapter comes about.
And as for us over here at Canon Fodder, doubledealer.substack.com, you can follow the Double Dealer on YouTube as well as Twitter. Buy a book, buy a magazine, and I don't know how to end podcasts, so I will say insert ending here.